Everyone is welcome. Today I bring you a moving story of overcoming and spiritual transformation that will move you. The impressive account of Axton Vexley, who went through a near-death experience and came back to life with a powerful message about the future. Before we start, comment here which city you are watching from. We want to get to know each one of you, and if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, take the opportunity to subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any impactful stories like this. Now, prepare yourself for a journey of mystery, revelation, and hope. Hello, my name is Axton Vexley. I'm an ordinary guy, like any other guy you could find walking the streets of New Orleans. I'm 28 years old now, but the story I'm going to tell happened a few years ago when I had just graduated in philosophy. I have never been a very religious or spiritual person. In fact, I used to be quite skeptical about these things, but something happened to me, something that completely changed my worldview and the way I live my life. It all started on the night of September 3rd, 2011. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, you know. I was celebrating my graduation with my friends and my boyfriend, Trevor Reynolds. We were in a bar, drinking, laughing, making plans for the future. That typical end-of-college atmosphere, where everyone makes promises to stay in touch, even though they know they probably won't keep it. The night progressed, and we became more and more happy, not to say drunk. When it was time to leave, we realized we were in a dilemma. Trevor was too dizzy to drive, and I wasn't in much better shape either. That's when our friend Kendrick Moore offered to give us a ride. At that time, taking a taxi in that part of the city wasn't easy, and transportation apps didn't even exist yet. So, we accepted Kendrick's offer without thinking too much. I remember feeling a pang of worry when I got into the car, but I ignored it. You know when you have that feeling that something isn't right, but you decide to move forward anyway? That was exactly it. We left the bar shortly after midnight. The streets of New Orleans were eerily quiet, which, thinking about it now, seemed like a bad omen. Trevor was already dozing in the back seat, and Kendrick looked confident behind the wheel. I was in the passenger seat, looking out the window, thinking about my life, the future, the possibilities that opened up in front of me. But in a matter of seconds, everything changed. Everything I had planned, dreamed of, hoped for, disappeared in the blink of an eye. A speeding car came out of nowhere, ran the red light and hit us head-on. The impact was so strong, so sudden, that I barely had time to process what was happening. Suddenly, the world around me was a chaos of twisted metal, shattered glass, and muffled screams. I felt a searing pain course through my entire body. I was trapped in the wreckage of the car, unable to move. The smell of gasoline and burning rubber filled my nostrils. I could hear sirens in the distance, but they seemed so far away. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was Trevor's voice, desperately calling my name. After that, everything went dark, and that's when my journey really began. When the paramedics arrived, I was already unconscious. Later, they told me that they had to use the jaws of life to pull me out of the wreckage of the car. Apparently, I was in critical condition, multiple fractures, internal bleeding, head trauma. The list of injuries was frightening. I was rushed to the hospital. In the ambulance, the paramedics struggled to keep my vital signs stable. I wasn't breathing on my own, and my heart stopped twice during the journey. Later, one of the paramedics told me it was one of the most difficult cases he had ever seen. Upon arriving at the hospital, I was immediately taken to the emergency room. Dr. Emily Westbrook, the chief physician on duty that night, took over my case. She and her team worked tirelessly to stabilize me, but the situation was critical. My body was in shock, reacting to the massive trauma of the accident. After hours of emergency surgery, they managed to control the bleeding and treat the most serious injuries, but the damage was already done. My brain had suffered significant trauma, and I fell into a deep coma shortly after surgery. Doctors didn't have much hope. They gave my parents a bleak outlook. Even if I survived, the chances of me waking up were slim, and the possibility of serious consequences was high. They put me on life support, monitoring my every heartbeat, every assisted breath. But here's the strange thing. While my body was there, motionless in the hospital bed, fighting to survive, I was elsewhere. It's hard to explain to someone who's never been through this, but I'll try. Suddenly, I found myself floating above my own body. It was as if I were an invisible observer, able to see and hear everything that was happening around me, but unable to interact with the physical world. I saw the doctors working frantically to save me. I saw my parents crying in the hallway, hugging each other, devastated by the news of the accident. I saw Trevor, who had come out of the accident largely unscathed, pacing the waiting room, blaming himself for his decision to get a ride with Kendrick. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him it wasn't his fault, but I couldn't. My words were silent. My touches were like air. I wandered the hospital hallways, witnessing scenes of pain, hope, and miracles. I saw families receiving terrible news and others celebrating unexpected recoveries. It was as if I had access to a world that is normally hidden from us, a world between life and death. And then, something even stranger happened. As I watched the doctors working on my body in the operating room, I saw a vortex of light open above the operating table. It was like a slowly rotating tunnel, emitting a soft and welcoming light. I felt an irresistible force pulling me towards him. At first, I resisted. I didn't want to leave my family, my friends, my life. But the force was stronger than my will. Little by little, I was drawn into the tunnel. And that's when my real journey began. When I entered the tunnel, it was as if time and space had lost all meaning. I no longer had a body. I was just pure consciousness, floating through this corridor of light. The feeling was indescribable. It wasn't like flying or swimming. It was like existing in a completely new state. The tunnel seemed to have no end. As I moved forward, I saw flashes of my life flashing past me. They weren't just memories. They were vivid experiences, like I was reliving every moment. I saw my childhood, my first steps, the day I learned to ride a bicycle. I saw my school years, the friendships I made, the hearts I broke and the ones that broke mine. Every moment was accompanied by a deep understanding that I had never had before. I could feel the impact of my actions, not only on myself but on everyone around me. It was as if I could see the invisible threads that connect all of our lives. As I progressed through the tunnel, the light became more and more intense, but it was not uncomfortable. It was a welcoming light, emanating an energy of love and peace that I had never experienced before. It was as if I was being embraced by the entire universe. At one point, I found myself reliving a particular memory. It was one day at college when a friend of mine, Jason, came to me for help. He was experiencing financial difficulties and needed a loan to pay his rent. At the time, I had some money saved, but I decided not to help. I told him I couldn't, that I was broke. Reliving that moment, I could feel Jason's disappointment and shame as if it were my own. I could see how that small, selfish decision had a significant impact on his life. It was painful, but at the same time, revealing. I realized that every choice we make, no matter how small it seems, has the power to change lives. As he progressed through the tunnel, these revelations became more and more frequent and profound. It was as if I was accessing universal wisdom, understanding truths that had always been there but that I had never been able to see. The journey through the tunnel seemed to last an eternity and, at the same time, just an instant. I lost all sense of time. It could have been seconds or centuries. It didn't matter. What mattered were the lessons I was learning, the truths that were being revealed. As I approached the end of the tunnel, the light became brighter and brighter. I could feel a presence, something bigger than me, calling me. I wasn't afraid. In fact, for the first time in my life, I felt completely at peace, completely at home. And then, finally, I walked through the light. When I walked through the light at the end of the tunnel, I was immediately enveloped by a feeling of unconditional love so intense it's hard to put into words. It was as if every atom of my being was being bathed in pure compassion and acceptance. There was no judgment, there was no fear, just a deep and complete peace. In this place beyond the light, there was no physical form as we know it. I didn't have a body, but still, I felt more me than I had ever been. It was as if all the layers of ego, of social identity had been removed, and what was left was my pure essence. It was then that I realized I wasn't alone. There were presences around me, beings of light that emanated the same energy of love that I felt. He did not see them with physical eyes, but he perceived them in a way that transcended the ordinary senses. They welcomed me, made me feel like I belonged there. One of these beings approached me. It had no defined shape. It was more like a focus of more intense light. Still, I recognized him instantly. It was my grandmother, who had passed away years before. But she wasn't the frail, sickly grandmother I remembered from her last days. It was her in her purest essence, radiant with love and wisdom. She didn't speak in words, but I could understand perfectly what she wanted to tell me. She showed me how proud she was of me, but she also made me see the areas in my life where I still needed to grow. There was no criticism in his message, just a deep love and a sincere desire to see me evolve. Other beings joined us. Some I recognized, relatives who were gone, friends I'd lost over the years. Others were entities I had never encountered before, but who seemed to know me intimately. They all shared with me bits of wisdom, insights into life and the universe that went far beyond my previous understanding. It was at that moment that I began to truly understand the purpose of life. It wasn't about accumulating wealth, achieving status or fame. The true purpose was to grow in love, learn to genuinely connect with others, to serve and evolve spiritually. As I absorbed these lessons, I felt as if I was being filled with renewing energy. Each conversation with these beings of light made me feel lighter, more complete. It was as if pieces of a cosmic puzzle were falling into place inside me. Then, something extraordinary happened. The entire environment around me began to pulse with an even more intense energy. The beings of light moved away, as if they were making way for something greater. And that's when I felt. I don't know if I can call it a presence because it was much more than that. It was as if love itself, the very consciousness of the universe, had manifested itself before me. There was no form, no image, just a light so pure and intense that it made the previous light seem like a mere reflection. In that moment, I felt completely exposed, as if every thought, every action of my life was being seen and understood. But there was no judgment, just total acceptance and unconditional love. I felt small in the face of this vastness, but at the same time, an integral part of it. It was in that moment of deep connection that I understood. Everything is one. All the separations that we perceive in earthly life, between people, between beings, between man and the divine, are illusions. Deep down, we are all part of a single consciousness, of a single love. This revelation was overwhelming. I cried, laughed, and marveled at the same time, even though I didn't have a physical body to express these emotions. It was pure experience, pure feeling. And then, gently, this presence began to communicate with me. Not with words, but with pure understanding that arose within me. She showed me that my journey on earth was not yet over, that I had a purpose to fulfill, lessons to learn and teach. With a mixture of reluctance and acceptance, I understood that I would need to return. But now I carried with me a truth that would forever change the way I saw the world and lived my life. While I was immersed in this light of unconditional love, something unexpected happened. Suddenly, I started having visions. They were not memories of my past, but rather vivid images of what seemed to be the future. It was like I was watching a movie, but at the same time being part of it. The first vision I saw was shocking. I saw a world in chaos, desperate governments printing money non-stop, causing an unprecedented financial crisis. The scenes were disturbing. People losing their savings overnight, Endless lines at banks, violent protests in the streets. It was as if the entire financial system as we knew it was falling apart. Then I saw something even more surprising. Cryptocurrencies, which at the time of my experience were barely known, have become the new dominant currency. At first, this seemed like a solution, a way for people to regain control over their finances. But I soon realized that this change brought with it new problems. The world plunged into a deep recession. Traditional economies were completely dismantled. The following scenes were pure social chaos. I saw uprisings around the world, the poor rising up against the elites, millions of refugees fighting for survival. In some places, things got so bad that I saw people being treated like animals, trapped in cages. It was a vision of horror, a dark omen for humanity. But then, in the midst of all this chaos, something extraordinary happened. A specific date appeared before me, shining as if it were made of light. October 15th, 2024. This date seemed to have a special meaning, as if it was a turning point for all of humanity. I saw crowds gathering all over the world that day. These were not violent protests, but solidarity movements. It was as if, suddenly, people had awakened to a new consciousness. I saw people of different races, religions, and nationalities coming together, sharing resources, helping each other. This vision filled me with hope. I realized that despite all the suffering and chaos, there was a chance for redemption for humanity. It was as if we were faced with a crucial choice: continue on the path of selfishness and destruction, or embrace a new era of love and unity. As the visions continued, I began to understand that my role in this story was not yet over. I felt like I was being tasked with a mission, to share what I had seen, to help people prepare for the challenges ahead, and most importantly, to remind everyone about the importance of love and compassion. When the visions ended, I felt overwhelmed. It was a lot of information, a lot of responsibility. Part of me wanted to stay there, in that realm of peace and love, away from all the problems I had seen. But another part understood that I needed to return, that I had a purpose to fulfill. It was then that I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder, or whatever. I was in that state. It was my grandmother again. Your touch gave me courage and confidence. She made me understand that I would not be alone on this journey, that I would always have guidance and support, even if I couldn't always see it or feel it. At that moment, I knew I was ready to go back. I was scared by what I had seen, by the responsibility I felt weighing on my shoulders. But he was also determined. I knew that each person has the power to make a difference, to change the course of the future. As I prepared to return, I took with me not only visions of what could come, but also the deep certainty of the unconditional love I had experienced. I knew that no matter how difficult things might get, that love would always be there, sustaining us all. And so, with a mix of apprehension and hope, I said goodbye to that kingdom of light, ready to face whatever the future held. Returning to my body was as intense an experience as the journey out. It was as if I was being pulled back through that tunnel of light, but now at high speed. Flashes of my life flashed past me again. But this time I saw them with new eyes, with the wisdom I had gained on the other side. As I moved closer to the physical world, I began to feel the limitations of my body again. It was like trying to wear clothes that were too small. I felt pain, discomfort, heaviness. Part of me wanted to resist, to return to that state of peace and unconditional love. But I knew I had a mission to accomplish. Suddenly I heard voices. They were distant at first, but they became clearer and clearer. I recognized Dr. Westbrook's voice, giving urgent orders. "He's coming back," someone shouted. I felt hands touching my body. I heard the beeping of machines increasing in intensity. Opening my eyes was a Herculean effort. The light in the hospital room, although dim, seemed blinding to me after being in that divine light. I blinked several times, trying to focus. I saw faces all around me, expressions of shock and joy. Dr. Westbrook was by my side, checking my vitals, asking questions I could barely process. Axton, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can understand me. With a lot of effort, I managed to squeeze his hand lightly. It was only then that I realized I was back. He had survived. The following days were a blur of tests, visits, and attempts to explain the unexplainable. The doctors were perplexed. According to all medical indicators, I should not have survived, much less woken up without serious after effects. They called my recovery miraculous, and I knew that term was more accurate than they realized. My parents were always by my side, tears of joy and disbelief in their eyes. Trevor was there too, holding my hand, repeatedly asking for forgiveness for the accident, even though I insisted there was nothing to forgive. I tried to tell them about my experience, about what I had seen and learned, but it was difficult to put into words. How to describe colors to someone who has never seen them? How can I explain the unconditional love I felt to people who have never experienced anything like it? Some believed me, others thought it was a result of the trauma or medication, but that didn't matter. I knew what I had experienced, and I knew that my life would never be the same. As I recovered physically, I began to notice profound changes in myself. Things that once seemed important, money, status, material possessions, now seemed insignificant. My focus changed completely. I wanted to help people. I wanted to share the love I had experienced. I also started to notice that I was more sensitive, more intuitive. Sometimes I knew things about people without them telling me. Other times, I had flashes of the future, little glimpses that usually came to fruition. The date of October 15th, 2024 was engraved in my mind. I knew it was important, that something significant would happen that day. But I also knew I couldn't just sit back and wait. I had to prepare myself and help others prepare too. When I was finally released from the hospital a few weeks later, I was a completely different person than the one who had gotten into that ambulance. Physically, I was weaker, still recovering, but spiritually, I was stronger than ever. I left the hospital with a clear mission: to live each day with love, help others, and prepare for what was to come. I didn't know exactly how I would do it, but I trusted that the path would reveal itself as I went along. And so, with uncertain steps but a determined heart, I began my new life. A life marked by the certainty that there is more in this world than we can see, and by the commitment to share the love and light that he had experienced on the other side. The first few months after leaving the hospital were a period of intense adjustment. Physically, I was still recovering. I had to do physical therapy regularly and take a series of medications. But the biggest challenge was mental and emotional. Everything around me felt different. The colors were more vivid, the sounds clearer. I could feel the energy of the people around me, almost as if I could see their auras. It was overwhelming at times, especially in crowded places. My relationship with Trevor has changed. He was there, supporting me every step of the way. But I could feel something was different. It wasn't a lack of love, on the contrary. It was as if the love had transformed into something deeper, more spiritual. We had long conversations about my experience, about what I had seen and learned. He was trying to understand, and I appreciated his effort, but I knew it was difficult for him to fully understand. My parents were also dealing with the situation as best they could. They were happy that I was alive, of course, but they were also concerned about the changes they saw in me. My mother, who had always been more open to spiritual issues, seemed more receptive to my stories. My father, a practical and skeptical man, had more difficulty accepting it. One of the biggest changes was in relation to my work. Before the accident, I had just graduated in philosophy and was considering a master's degree. Now that seemed irrelevant. I felt like I needed to do something more practical, something that could really help people. I started volunteering at a local homeless shelter. There, I could put into practice the unconditional love I had experienced. No matter how difficult the person's situation was, I could see the divine light in them. This completely changed the way I related to others. At the same time, I began to study more about near-death experiences, spirituality, and the prophecies I had seen. I spent hours in the library, reading everything I could find about it. I also started meditating regularly, trying to maintain that connection I felt on the other side. The visions I had had about the future, the financial meltdown, cryptocurrencies, social strife, were always on my mind. I watched the news closely, looking for signs that those predictions were coming true. And, to my concern, I began to see signs that they were. I decided I needed to do something about it. I began giving talks in small groups, sharing my story and the lessons I had learned. At first, it was just friends and family, but little by little, the circle expanded. People who had heard about my experience came to me, wanting to know more. I didn't consider myself a guru or a spiritual leader. Far from it. I was just someone who had had an extraordinary experience and felt a responsibility to share it. My message was simple. Love is the most powerful force in the universe, and each of us has the power to change the world through small acts of kindness and compassion. Of course, not everything was easy. There were days when I felt overwhelmed by everything I had experienced and learned. Days when the reality of this world seemed too heavy compared to the peace I had experienced on the other side. In those moments, I remembered my grandmother's gentle touch, the reassurance that I was not alone on this journey. As time passed, I found a balance. I learned to live in this world while maintaining a connection with what I had experienced. I learned to use my experience not as a burden, but as a source of strength and inspiration. And so, day after day, I continued my journey, always with my eyes on the horizon, waiting and preparing for what was to come, always with an open heart, ready to share the love that he had discovered to be the true essence of everything. As the months turned into years, my life took on a new rhythm. Memories of my near-death experience remained vivid, and I had learned to integrate them into my everyday life. The main focus of my existence became preparing for the events I had envisioned, especially the crucial date of October 15, 2024. My volunteer work at the homeless shelter evolved. With the help of some friends who were inspired by my story, we were able to expand the project. We began offering not just shelter and food, but also practical skills classes, psychological support, and even basic financial guidance. The idea was to give people not just temporary help, but tools to rebuild their lives. At the same time, I continued with my lectures and study groups. I didn't consider myself a preacher or a prophet, but rather someone with an important message to share. It spoke about the interconnectedness of all things, the importance of love and compassion, and the need to prepare for the significant changes that I believed were coming. A significant part of my preparation involved financial education. Based on the views I had about a possible economic collapse and the rise of cryptocurrencies, I began to study these subjects intensely. I learned about economics, investments, and, of course, blockchain and cryptocurrencies. Not to get rich, but to better understand what could happen and be able to guide people. Trevor, who remained by my side throughout this time, was instrumental in this process. He was a programmer and helped me better understand the technical side of cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology. Together, we began creating workshops to teach people the basics of this new technology, always emphasizing the importance of using it ethically and responsibly. My relationship with my family has also evolved. My parents, who initially had difficulty accepting the changes in me, slowly began to understand. My mother even started participating in the meditation groups I organized. My father, although still skeptical about the spiritual aspect, began to respect my social work and even occasionally helped at the shelter. As the years went by, I became increasingly attentive to news about economic instability, about the growth of cryptocurrencies, about social conflicts intensifying in various parts of the world. Although nothing drastic had happened yet, these signs only reinforced my conviction that we needed to prepare. But I knew that preparedness wasn't just about physical or financial survival. It was, above all, a spiritual preparation. We needed to strengthen our community ties, cultivate compassion and empathy, learn to care for each other. This became the main focus of my talks and workshops. As we approached October 2024, I felt a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. I didn't know exactly what would happen that day, but I had a strong feeling that it would be a turning point. Everything I had done in the last few years was preparation for this moment. And so, with a heart full of hope and determination, I continued my journey, preparing to face whatever the future held, always guided by the love and light I had experienced in that transformative experience. As the year 2024 progresses, I feel a growing anxiety mixed with deep expectation. The date of October 15th, which I saw so clearly in my visions, is rapidly approaching. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, my heart racing, thinking about what this day might bring. Over the past few months, I have stepped up my preparation efforts. I have organized a series of spiritual retreats where people can disconnect from the world for a few days and reconnect with their spiritual essence. At these retreats, we share experiences, meditate together, and discuss ways to bring more love and awareness into our everyday lives. I also began working more actively with environmental and social justice groups. The visions I saw clearly showed that the challenges we could face are closely linked to how we treat our planet and each other. I participated in peaceful demonstrations, helped organize awareness campaigns, and worked to build bridges between different groups and communities. Trevor has been my pillar of support throughout this process. He helps me stay grounded when my anxiety threatens to consume me, and he encourages me when the weight of responsibility seems too much. Together, we continue our work to educate people about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, always focusing on how these tools can be used for the common good. One of the most rewarding things has been seeing how my story and work have inspired others to make changes in their own lives. I constantly receive messages from people who, after hearing my story, decided to leave unfulfilling jobs to pursue their true calling, or who began volunteering in their communities, or who simply began treating others with more kindness and understanding. Of course, not everything is perfect. There are days when I feel overwhelmed by responsibility, days when I doubt if I'm doing enough or if I'm on the right path. In these moments, I remember the feeling of unconditional love I experienced on the other side, and it gives me the strength to carry on. I also have to deal with skepticism and even hostility from some people. Some accuse me of being a charlatan, others of spreading unnecessary fear. I try not to let this get me down, always remembering that everyone is on their own path of understanding and growth. As October 15th approaches, I feel a growing energy around me. I'm not the only one who feels like something important is about to happen. Many of the people I work with and teach also feel this expectation, this sense that we are on the cusp of great change. I've decided that I'll spend October 15th at a large community gathering I'm organizing at a local park. It will be a day of meditation, sharing, and spiritual preparation. I don't know what exactly will happen that day, but I feel it is important to be together, united in spirit and purpose. Looking ahead to the days and months that will follow October 15th, I feel a mixture of hope and apprehension. The visions I saw showed significant challenges ahead, possible economic crises, social conflicts, drastic changes in the way we live. But they also showed the incredible potential we have as human beings, our ability to unite, to rise above adversity. I don't know exactly what the future holds, but I know we are on the cusp of something significant. Whatever happens on October 15th and in the days that follow, I am determined to face it with the courage, compassion, and unconditional love I have experienced on my journey beyond life. Sitting here, writing these words, I feel the weight of responsibility and the lightness of hope. My near-death experience completely changed my life and my worldview. It showed me that there is so much more to existence than we can see or touch, that we are all connected in ways we can barely understand. Looking back at the years that have passed since that fateful night in New Orleans, I marvel at the journey I've been on. From a young man who recently graduated in philosophy, without a clear direction in life, I became someone with a defined purpose, a mission that transcends my own existence. I don't consider myself special or chosen. I'm just someone who had the opportunity to glimpse something beyond this reality, and feels a responsibility to share what I've learned. Every person I meet, every life I touch, is an opportunity to spread a little more light and love in this world. As we approach October 15th, 2024, I feel a mix of emotions. Yes, There is anxiety about the unknown that awaits us, but there is also a deep sense of peace and trust. Whatever happens that day, and in the days that follow, I know we are not alone. There are greater forces at play, a divine plan that we may not fully understand but which we can trust. My hope for the future is that we can face the challenges ahead with courage, compassion, and unity. May we remember in the most difficult moments that we are all one, all part of the same universal consciousness, all deserving of love and respect. The visions I had showed possibilities for great changes and challenges. They spoke of a possible economic collapse, of profound social transformations, of a spiritual awakening on a global scale. I don't know exactly how or when these things might manifest, but I feel like we are on the threshold of a new era for humanity. My message to everyone reading this is simple: do not be afraid. Always remember that at the core of all existence is love. Not the romantic or familial love we know in our daily lives, but an unconditional, universal love that connects us all. It is this love that will guide us through any challenges we may face. Each of us has a role to play in this great transformation that is to come. It can be something small, an act of kindness towards a stranger, a conscious choice to live more sustainably, a moment of pause to connect with your own spiritual essence. Or it could be something bigger, leading community initiatives, creating new technologies that benefit humanity, inspiring others through art or music. The important thing is that we do our part, that we choose love over fear, unity over division, compassion over judgment. Because in the end, this is what I learned on my journey beyond life. We are all one. Every choice we make, every action we take, affects the whole. So, as we move into this uncertain but possibility-filled future, remember, you are not alone. We are all on this journey together, connected by invisible but powerful bonds of love and consciousness, and together, we can create the world we dream of. The future is in our hands. Let's embrace it with courage, hope, and above all with love. I don't know what exactly October 15th, 2024 will bring, but I know I'll be ready to face it, and I hope you will be too. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can transform the world.